profession has its own professional association, and ICMA happens to be the one for local government professionals. It's not just about city managers. I'm going to talk about that. But it really is open to everyone. I tell people that ICMA taught me everything I never learned in my formal education, right? When I went and got my master's degree, I learned all about budgeting, strategic planning. ICMA taught me how to tell a council member no. You know, and that's really something that they don't teach you sort of along the way. It's an art. But as an ICMA student chapter, you will enjoy all the benefits of all the programs and services that ICMA has to offer at a substantially reduced rate. So I would encourage you to, whether you're thinking about a career in city management or not, get plugged into ICMA. It's really such a really good organization, and I can talk to you about it. More about me, you heard a little bit about my background. That's all the technical stuff, right? I got into this job, into local government. I actually fell into it. You know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut or a cowboy. I certainly wasn't the guy that put his hand up and said, I want to be a city manager. I didn't even know what a city manager was. I started working in the city of Santa Clarita back in 1994, and I thought at the time I was going to be a UPS driver. You know, I grew up in this really small town in southeastern Pennsylvania near Amish country. And our joys were running the horse and buggies into the snow piles. I know, but that's what we did when we were kids. So when I got the opportunity to get out of there and come to California, because my parents had divorced when I was fairly young, I remember I got off the plane at LAX on Christmas Eve, and I walked outside, it was 83 degrees, and I said, I think I know what I'm going to do when I get out of high school. And I have not shoveled snow since. Now my snow is freshly groomed when I get there. But I started working for UPS. I thought that was going to be a fantastic job, and it was a part-time job, really good benefits, hard work. So it always afforded me the opportunity to do things during the day. And one day I applied to be a recreation leader for the city of Santa Clarita. I didn't even know what a recreation leader was. But I was the guy that did facility reservations. So if you want to have a wedding, a special event or something, you'd call me, and I would arrange that for you and take care of all that. The city was growing really, really quickly at the time, and the internet was sort of just coming online. I remember I had a dial-up modem. That 14.4 kilobits per second it went through. So this was when the internet was just getting started. And I was creating web pages in Notepad to help show people what amenities were available in the park. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but my department head was sort of noticing it, as well as the city manager. So they eventually pulled me out of Parks and Rec and moved me all around the organization and exposed me to local government. I ended up resigning from UPS and taking a full-time job with the city as a management analyst. And I thought, man, this is it. I've really made it. And the thing that brought me joy was being able to see on a real-life basis the impact of my work out in the streets. Like even when I did facility reservations, I would go over to some of these events and see people smiling there. And it made me feel good. It made me feel like I wanted to do more of that. So when I started promoting and learning about local governments, I hooked up with this city manager at the time who just literally grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and said, you're going to be a city manager. He saw something in me that I didn't even see. So he took me out to the city of Riverside with him, which was challenging because my wife was a Valley girl and never lived anywhere else but the Valley. So now I'm moving her out to the IE. We were out in Riverside, and I got paroled for good behavior after about 19 months there, which is really hard, because now it's like, what am I going to do? I'm making a pretty decent wage here. So my wife and I ended up relocating up north to Elk Grove, California, because I knew someone that just became city manager up there. And he hired me as his assistant to the city manager. And it was fantastic. We were starting a brand new city. Elk Grove, here's a little piece of trivia for you. Elk Grove, California was the first city of the 21st century. It was incorporated July 1st of 2000. So when we incorporated, we started our own police department, our own transit agency, we built city facilities. I mean, it was literally starting a city from the ground up. And the impact of that, I said, man, I want to do this more. You know, how do I do this more? But I found out pretty quickly that there's only one city manager in an organization at a time. So I said, if I want to be a city manager, I'm going to have to either stick around and wait for this guy to go, or go off and continue to gain those skills to become a city manager. So I ended up going to the city of Livermore as the assistant city manager, Livermore, how many guys know where Livermore is? It's up by the Bay Area and the East Bay. It's wonderful. It's cut into wine country there. It's just unbelievable place there. The day I started was 2009, housing crisis. So my job was to completely unwind about $2.5 million and lay off 16 people from that organization. It was not fun. I learned a lot about local government along the way and a lot about what it means to care and feed for people. After 5 years there, I had the opportunity to become the city manager in the city of Tracy, and got paroled for good behavior after 3.5 years there. We'll talk about that at the night. But that's what the job is. I think that, here it is. The council and I agreed on basically everything moving forward through the city except for one thing: who should be their city manager. Right? So they decided, and they had the vote to pick a new city manager. And I looked in the mirror and said, I got more years behind me than in front of me. What do I want to do? So I started getting involved in ICMA and learning about the profession on a much grander scale. My role as ICMA president over the past year has been a whirlwind. We have 13,000 members in about 30 countries. I've been fortunate throughout my time on the ICMA's board to spend time in San Juan, Austria, Bratislava. I'm going to Manila. Almost every state in the United States, except for a pocket up there around Idaho and Nebraska. And I've learned that ICMA is just like our organizations. It's an organization in flux because we're just people at the end of the day. We all have our own values. And as much as we don't want to have scope creep into our jobs, what happens politically in the world impacts all of us as individuals. And ICMA is no different. We were doing things around equity and inclusion and diversity following the death of George Floyd. And then we had some members that say, why are you doing that? You're going too far. You're losing your mission. ICMA needs to get out of that space. Right? And that's a difficult conversation to navigate among 30,000 members. But I feel like my work in going around and sitting down and talking with people has actually helped move that issue forward to help us focus on what does the I and ICMA need? Is ICMA just this organization that is American-centric, or are we truly going to offer programs and services in New Zealand and around the world, and what does that look like? So the international footprint for ICMA is a question that we've been struggling with for many, many years, but I feel like my time as president sort of got to move that forward. Now as the city manager of Moorpark, I get to take a lot of what I've seen and what I've learned and put it back into my community, and put it back into the actual work of building a good community and making residents' lives better every day. If they notice the work that we're doing, something's going wrong. You shouldn't have to turn on the faucet and go, woohoo, the water came out. That's just a natural thing that should happen. And that's because of the work that we do on a daily basis. It's a wonderful profession to be a part of. The work is never finished. We are constantly changing and evolving and looking for good people. So I would encourage you to, whether you are aspiring to be a city manager or work in city management, which is a lot of different things, you can be in a police department and be a city manager. Because it's all about how do we put the resources together to move a community forward. And just because it says city manager on my door, at least my philosophy is, I want the people in my organization to think like city managers. And that's where you all can come in. You don't have to be a city manager. It's something that I chose to do because it's just, I think, a part of me to be able to sort of bring together divergent ideas. It's a wonderful profession. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. It definitely has its downsides to it. But to me, the upsides by far outweigh the downsides. So I try to inspire and elevate people at every opportunity I can. I want to get young people in my organization. I walked into my organization and I had a bunch of people that had been there for 15, 20 years. And I said, uh-oh, they're all going to be leaving. And so, now it's a cornucopia of genders and races and ethnicities that is reflective of our community. and we're all doing the right things, I think, to try and make the world a better place for the time that we own this thing. Right? And it's only about this moment in time. So I would encourage you, irrespective of where you want to be or how you want to get there, choose your path. You know, don't follow my path. Don't do it the way I did. Choose your own path. I think that local government work is still the most noblest of professions that are out there. Certainly you're not going to do it for the fame and the fortune, but you will have a real impact on your community and the lives of other people. I try to think about it sometimes. How many lives have I touched throughout the course of my 30-year career? And that is the motivation to keep me going. So I wish you guys the best of success. I hope that going through the MPPA program here, that you get a taste of what local government's about. I hope you take that, build on that, attend some ICMA events, hear from some local professionals. There are at every level, students, department heads, analysts, community development directors, city managers, assistants, deputies, you name it. Learn from them, hear from them, and do your part in sort of making the world a better place. That's really what this stuff's about. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's enough of me talking, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you feel in any gaps. Yes, thank you.
This is going to show my lack of knowledge about city management. But what is the difference between a city manager and a mayor?
You know what? I start every one of my speeches that way, and I shouldn't have done that. I don't ever want to presume that anyone knows what a city manager is. I got to admit, I didn't even know what a city manager was when I started working in local government. So, you've heard of, who's Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah, he's the guy in Facebook.
Facebook. Who is Elon Musk? Tesla. So he's an executive director that runs a multi-billion-dollar organization that reports to a board of directors, right? Mm-hmm. The executive director runs the day-to-day operations of the stuff, and the board sets the policy. Well, that's what city managers are. I run a multi-million-dollar municipal organization. My budget is $20 million. I run the day-to-day operations, and the council who gets elected set policy and set direction, and I implement it.
So are you kind of the equivalent to the county executive officer for the county?
Exactly.
And then the council is like the board of supervisors?
That's exactly right. That's exactly. And unfortunately, I don't have to go through an election.
But the mayor gets elected?
The mayor gets elected every 2 years, and we have council members get elected every 4 years, and they...
and the mayor is associated with the council?
The mayor's a representative of the council. So what they do is they run meetings and they set policies. So I'll take them an issue like
Okay.
they'll say, we've got a trash problem on the streets. We want the streets clean. That's a policy question. So then they give that to me, and I come back and I say, okay, you can sweep it, you can rebuild it, you can wash it down, you can put out trash cans. These are the costs and impacts of that. This is my recommendation. What do you want to do? Then they adopt it and I implement it. So I'm a day-to-day guy, and if the council's hanging around City Hall all day, every day, something's terribly wrong. I mean, my council, I have a realtor, an insurance broker, one guy owns a brewery, I have a health insurance person, so they have full-time jobs. But my full-time job is the city.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Hey, I'm along from 2019, Mario Jones. I guess I'm curious to know, I know as a city manager, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades, if you will. But going forward for the future, where do you see the gaps? Or what are the greatest needs, whether it's Moorpark or some other cities that you've been associated with? Where do you see, I guess, the biggest gap you have as a city manager of the greatest needs?
That is actually a very provocative question, and it's one that ICMA has been struggling with for years because we're trying to come up with tools to fill those gaps. One of the things that I thought was really fascinating as I was learning about this profession was watching city managers go into a room of people, the council meeting, filled up with people like you. And half of them saying go left, and half of them saying go right. And the ideal city manager at the time was able to take nuggets of each of those conversations, figure out a way to steer it and create policy that people can say, you know what, I don't love it, but I get it. I understand it. Like that I thought was such a masterful art. Now, that is tantamount into my job because I've got 5 different elected officials. And if I ask them one question, I can get 7 or 8 different answers. Right? So the skill is being able to take that information and channel it into a way to where people can go, I sort of get it. And the challenge that we're running into, and we could talk about this all day, it's related to technology, it's related to social media, it's related to sort of the now mentality. The challenge that you see now is that people say go left or go right, and as city managers try to navigate that, they say, no, I don't like that idea. In fact, that idea is stupid. And there's just great divide in the middle of this polarization. And the skill set is being able to weave throughout that to find a common ground. And that's a skill set that is a challenge among the profession, and one that is certainly waning. And I don't know how to do it. I'm okay at it, but it's definitely a need that's out there. It's not budgeting, believe it or not, it's not community development, finance, all that stuff. I am a jack of all trades, but I got a solid team. You know, if I need to know how big a pipe is, I go to my engineer. You know, if I need to know how much something costs, I go to my finance department. But they can't help me navigate those policy discussions that are dividing this country. Those are all simple things. Imagine if we had hard things to talk about, right, where you're really making an impact on people's lives. That's the skill set that's needed. It's the art of the negotiation, and it's a challenge. And we're part of the problem. Other questions? How many folks? Oh, go ahead.
On behalf of the students, let me ask this. Our role is to help inspire students to do public service, broadly defined, but also, like you said, teach them some hard skills, right? Budgeting, finance, human resources, what have you. But in terms of figuring out the next step, some of our students already work in local government, so it's easy for them. But there are many undergrads here, there are other students from other sort of criminology or other backgrounds. So what is your advice in terms of, for folks like that, to figure out a path? You sort of fell into it, sort of by accident, it worked out for you. But for those who want to be a little more deliberate, what's your advice, apart from joining ICMA? What can they do to find that path?
Yeah, I skipped over a lot there. I did fall into it. There's no path. There really isn't. I used to think that, you know, in some of the more paramilitary structures of police and fire, you become this, and then a corporal, and a sergeant, and a captain, and lieutenant, and assistant. It doesn't work that way in city management profession. I would suggest, rather than aspiring to be a city manager, you do 2 things. One, you figure out what you want to do and why you want to do it. You know, why you want to be a city manager. Is it that the numbers bring you joy? Is it that helping people give you joy? Work in parks and recreation. And when you get into an organization like that, do as much as you possibly can. That's the part that I really didn't talk about. As I was going through the various progressions in a lot of different organizations, they would give me assignments I had no idea what it was. But I would take it on willingly, do it, and learn about it. I learned about a lot of different stuff. And it took me a while to figure out, actually it took someone telling me I was going to be a city manager before I figured out I was going to be a city manager. Here's the other important part. And this I learned along the way. I wish I would have learned it earlier. Figure out what you want to do in your life. You know, do you want to be a good mom? Do you want to be a good sister? Do you want to be a good husband or wife? Whatever that is. Because at the end of the day, we get one shot on this rock. And when I'm gone, it's not going to say, here lies Troy Brown, city manager. So live the best life that you can live. And it doesn't matter if you're kicking rocks. You know, you're gonna be happy. So, you know, you could be sort of striving for that golden ring, and you'll be like Bugs Bunny or the Wile E. Coyote. Right? It catches the rover, and it's like, okay, now what? Right? Now what? So make sure that your personal life is putting you on a path that brings you joy, because that'll make the job so much easier. I put so much time and dedication into trying to be a city manager that I forgot about that. You know, I looked around and my son was 7 years old. I'm like, oh my gosh, when did you get out of diapers? You know, but now I take stock in that stuff, and I didn't, there's no pathway forward. Do as much as you can in local government, learn and suck it up, move around. as much as you possibly can. Don't feel like you're gonna get pigeonholed anywhere. You know, if you're in the police department for 4 years, go to public works, spend time in fire, it all matters, because you become that jack of all trades. But along the way, it's hard work, but if you're a good person, it's not gonna matter. And that's really the most important thing. And that perspective of making sure that you're taking care of your own life, the rest of that stuff really doesn't matter. But I wish I would have learned that sooner. I'm happily married now, despite the fact that I was, 6 days away from being divorced as I was going on kids. I'm happily married. But that's the part that really matters. It's, you don't want to grind away so much and try to figure out what that path is that you forget about the things that are truly important in your life, which is your life. Yes?
How do you find Ventura County as an environment for professional public managers?
It's funny. When I first moved to California in 1987, Ventura County was a very different place than it is now. Ventura County was a place that was pretty homogeneous, pretty upscale, and pretty Republican. That was sort of my image of it from the outside. Having been and lived and worked in Ventura County from a government perspective, I see it changing. I see a change in the values of the county. I see a change in governance and the approach toward the county. And frankly, back in some of the earlier days of many of my predecessors, a lot of the cities in Ventura County were run with an iron fist. Right? So now a lot of that power is going back into the communities and going back into the people. So I see pockets of that. So I think Ventura County, from a governance perspective, is easier to navigate than it probably was some time ago. I am not a political person. I swim in political waters, but it doesn't matter if I'm Republican, independent, or whatever. I implement the will of the council. If they say we're going to ban abortions, we'll figure out a way to do it. I don't get involved in the politics of it. But the politics of the environment certainly shape where you want to be. I would not do well in a San Francisco. That's so far to one side to me. From a value perspective, I would struggle with it. But I think Ventura County is much, I think it's an evolving county, and I think it's catching up with the times. For a while, Ventura County didn't stay. Never moved. I left here in 1990 and came back in 2010, but for a mall, Simi Valley looked exactly the same. And that's a sign of what Ventura County is. I like where it's going.
Thank you.
Yes.
What would you say was the biggest learning moment in your career?
The biggest learning moment in my career. I had a couple. There's two that I can get out. One, I was in the city of Santa Clarita, and I was working for a finance director. Complicated story. We were sort of reissuing some bonds for a mall project up there, and we were going to save the landowner tons of money. So I'm just going through the motions, doing all that stuff, and got my team together and ready to take it to city council. City manager picks it up and says, "Wait a minute, what are we getting from this?" I said, "We're not getting anything. It's not our bonds. We didn't pay for them. We're saving them money." He says, "Well, I want you to go across the street to New Hall Land Info. And I want you to get $300,000 so we can put lights at a park." I said, "You're kidding me. We're going to city council tonight." He goes, "Well, you guys should have checked with me before you start on this project." Fair enough. Walked across the street, sat down with the executive at New Hall Land Info, and said, "Hey, we're saving you a bunch of money." He said, "Stop." He says, "I know exactly what you want. You're not getting any of this money. You go back to City Hall, and you tell them that if they want something, they better bring it up at the beginning of the process." Learning moment is, for me, was information is king. We're the people serving people business. I don't produce a widget. So the only thing I have is information. And the more people that have that information, the better off I am. Other thing I learned was, I can't go into the details of it because it was a closed session conversation, but I was doing union negotiations in a city up north that rhymes with Tracy. And it was impossible the unions knew everything we were talking about in closed session. So I called out a specific council member because I knew that council member was leaking what was happening in the closed session. I called that council member out, and I think that was the beginning of the end of me. So my lesson there was sort of never bitch up as a city manager. To be very careful about that. But so that was, those are the two big ones. Yes.
So I have a question. I know that for city managers, some people prefer the city manager to be a homegrown local because wouldn't they know like their dynamics better? And some people are like, no, we need someone from outside. They could see things differently than us. What do you personally think on that? You've traveled, you've been somewhere longer. Like, how do you think you drive better when you are an outsider, or when you're like more involved? You think you're doing better as a city manager?
Well, all right, so I'm not going to mince words on that. I think that's a good policy question, right? That's what elected officials ask all the time. Should our city manager live in the city? Should they be from the city? As a professional, someone who's been through this for 30 years, there's not a lot of people in my city that have dedicated their life to public service. Running a municipal corporation is very different than running a private industry. And I don't think that there's a lot of people inside of a city that sort of do that. And I would want the best. What's important for me, I think, in city managers in general, is that they make sure that they feel a part of their community. That you just don't go to City Hall, sit in your office all day long, sign ordinances and contracts. You get out there, you meet with people, you live in the community if you can, you learn what their issues are. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come and go, you drive down Princeton? Have you seen those potholes? They're terrible. I said, yeah, I actually live here. Drive that road 4 times a day. On my way over to Ralph's on LA Avenue. So I know exactly what you're talking about. They go, oh, okay, well, what are you doing about it? So that issue's now gone. Right? So I think that as a profession, I think city management as a profession is a waning field. I don't think there's a lot of folks out there that do it well. Because if you read about city managers in the newspaper, something's gone wrong. Right? And there's a lot of cities that are struggling with, rotating city managers in and out, trying to find someone local. And it's really just about that city manager feeling like they're a part of that community. And that responsibility lies on the city manager, not the community. So I think that you have to ingrain yourself in the community. Whether you live there, I think you should live there. I've always lived in the cities I've worked for. Tried to, what I did. But I think the bigger issue is when there's a disconnect, whether that person is from the city or not, between that office and the residents. That's all. These are really good questions. You guys all, want to be city managers? How many people work in nonprofits? How many people work in local governments? How many people work in the private sector? See, all that stuff matters. All that stuff matters. I mean, there's no pathway. So I've seen people transition from the military, from the private sector, from nonprofits, all into local government. It all matters. All those experiences matter. Just take it with you, leave the rest behind, and continue to move forward. That's what I'm going to come back after you guys form a student chapter because I'm your ICMA. I guess I'm your ICMA representative. But I'm going to come back to make sure you guys want to sign up. PJ is always here. I really appreciate you guys for inviting me. I'm very accessible. I'm the city manager of Moorpark, so you can find me on the website. I'm pretty transparent that way. If you ever had any questions, please let me know. I might be reaching out to some of you guys saying, hey, we got some internships or something to fill. Let's come do it for a little while. Maybe there's something that I can give you that you can give me, or some sort of mutual benefit for both of us. That to me works. I need people serving people. You're all here, so you're all have a problem. But thank you very much for having me, and good luck.